So, what if being too smart is actually holding you back when it comes to AI? Today's guest discovered that some of our most intelligent employees were actually the worst at using AI, and it's costing them their competitive edge. So, can your expertise be an obstacle? That's what we're going to talk today on the AI powered business leader.
Welcome to the AI Powered Business Leader. This is the show that helps business leaders excel in the rapidly evolving environment of AI integration and implementation. We go beyond the hype to provide practical solutions for real businesses. Whether you're facing challenges like developing a clear AI strategy, upskilling your workforce, or ensuring data privacy and compliance, we've got you covered. Here is
And before I introduce today's guest, I just want to mention that my new book, An Absolute Beginner's Guide to Using AI, is now available. You can get that at aipowered.biz/guide, and the link to that will be in the show notes. So that's An Absolute Beginner's Guide to Using AI. So today I have an amazing guest. This is not the first time I've had her on one of my podcasts. Camille, you're very welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me again, Alastair. I'm excited.
Yeah. So this is really interesting. And like when you told me about this, like I was thinking about, how there's so many things about AI that can make us resist it. And adoption and people using it, like there's lots of good reasons maybe why we should not be using it, like the environmental impact and things like that, or the fact that it makes mistakes in certain circumstances. But the gains from using it properly and the potential gains we have in science and development and things like that could possibly outweigh all of those negatives. But if people don't experiment and start using it, we can see them fall behind. Can you tell me like what happened with this scenario that you were telling me about last month?
Yeah, so really, really interesting problem that I'm facing now as an employer with how fast AI is uh, becoming such a large part of like a tool we use every day within the agency. And I was introduced to this really intelligent, capable, really like bluntly like a perfect fit from an agency perspective. That if I had been introduced to her a few years ago, like really would have been probably like a long-term relationship. But what was it really fascinating about this is that she had taken her career. She had done a. She was very much a careerist in marketing, and she had kind of planted herself in different places throughout her career. But her last job placement was working within um, an educational institution. And there was very much a resistance to AI. There was zero lack of adoption. In fact, it was like a fireable offense to be using AI within the workplace. And she felt like it was very rigid and very dogmatic to just basically be working for one brand. And she wanted to be more of in an agency space to have more of that range. And what was really interesting was the almost like unbeknownst to her resistance to using AI and ChatGPT kind of in her day to day work. And it was very difficult for her to get over the learning curve and to kind of like almost have the like desire to adopt AI as part of her job requirement. And it's really complicated to kind of break down because from my perspective as being more entrepreneurial, I can't understand why you would want to take more time to do it kind of yourself than like have the aid and assistance of working with AI. But and we can dig into that kind of further. But anyways, there was just this kind of almost like it was I don't want to be disparaging, but almost a sense like it was like below her and like below her work to be able to use it. And not wrong in that if you're not understanding how to use it, what comes out at first pass is often junk. Like it's really about the quality of question and the quality of input, right? And I'm sure that's what you talk about in your book. Um, but anyways, yeah, so she really resisted kind of using it. And it got to the point where we had to part ways because I'm in a very
Wow.
difficult dilemma as a business owner because it's like it if you think about it from a time cost perspective, right? And even like with where clients are at, if they're used to receiving a brand guide within a week, like if we meet on Monday and I can have it to them by Friday, but then it now takes someone, meaning that it would actually take me from a time cost perspective, let's say 2.5 hours, right, to get like that finalized product. But if it takes someone 3 full days, 3 8-hour days to complete a brand core that may be as good or not as good as what I could do with AI, it makes streamlining and profitability very complicated because I'm now paying 3 full days worth for something that should take, now in my mind, 2 hours, if that,
Mhm.
right? Like that's like a generous 2 hours. So it's, on one hand, it's like the client expectation of like, it's completely transformed the time in which clients expect things. And then on a second, it's like it also greatly changes the way in which I can maybe not charge because like the value is still there, but at least the expectation of like productivity within my workforce of like how much time are you getting to work on something if
Mhm.
it's been completely cut down.
Yeah. This is really interesting because this kind of overlaps a lot with my other podcast, The Recognized Authority, where I've spoken with people about pricing and value pricing. Jonathan Stark of Ditching Hourly, which is his mission is to rid the world of hourly billing. And like this seems like a perfect scenario for that, where if you went to your like your subcontractors or your employees and say, look, we're not going to work on an input hours basis. We're going to work on an output. Like you get paid X amount for the brand core document or whatever it is. Would that motivate them to find more efficiencies, and everybody wins that way? You get it quicker. They get paid X amount for getting the work done. That's one approach, but like that won't work in every scenario. And even if they choose to do it over 3 days, the client still gets it 3 days later. So there's all sorts of different impacts there that are fascinating. I was talking yesterday at an event I was presenting, actually an American corporation who have an office here in Sligo in Ireland, in the west coast of Ireland. They're based in Utah. They're a big e-commerce retailer,
Cool.
but we were talking about the fact that there's all the surveys are showing that a lot of employees are actually using AI. Like a huge amount of employees are using it, but their employers are not being told about it because there's no incentive for employees to talk about it. But there's lots for them to lose. Like they can potentially be punished. They can lose respect. Like, oh, you wrote a really great email, John. I was like, oh, well, actually, I use ChatGPT for that. Or fear of job loss, or no reward for being used for AI being used, and fear of increased workload or things like that. So I can understand why there's a lot of resistance to, particularly like where you talked about, like it could be a fireable offense. And I know that in a lot of kind of education right now, what they're finding is that students are being, castigated for cheating by using AI. But we're also seeing studies in education. There was one that came out from World Bank Africa recently, which showed that a 6-week program of a teacher-led training helped students to achieve 2 years worth of learning in 6 weeks using GPT-4 with Microsoft Copilot. But that was led by the teachers. So there's this, like, right now education is really struggling. So I can understand if somebody who's in an educational institute, like that might be in their mentality. But one of the things that you said that was really interesting is like feeling that it's below them, or like, oh, I don't need that tool. Is that like what you're talking about in terms of mentality?
Well, I think it just really comes down to that there is this like great divide, right? And it's really fascinating. I had on my podcast on Art of the Brand, I had also a top AI expert say like it's really fascinating right now because like half the universities are saying that this is a tool that you need to learn skills into the workforce to like live with it, right? Like they're testing them on different things. Like it's not finding the answer, it's almost the quality of the input and how you can kind of live with symbiotically with AI. And then there's other schools and there's that other camp of like you can't, like it, there's absolutely like there's just no conversation about it. Like this just cannot be used within an educational system and regime. And it's fascinating studying and understanding kind of where those two groups are going to go. This individual in particular was such a strong personality and career expert that it's disparaging to say they felt too good for it, but it's almost like they've been in this job for so long that there's no way that something that's not human, that doesn't have that range of experience and like almost emotional learning period, right? Of like going through so many jobs and working on so many different brands and different areas within this job could do a better job. So it's almost like an ignorance of when the first question I ask is not as good as how I could write it, there isn't a potential possibility in which it could be improved to get to a place to be better than I. It's total mindset of like, I'm not prepared to put in the work to understand why this is such a game changer. And that's what's even interesting with what you're saying with like with these larger corporations. And it's it's the fear, that's the seed I want to plant of like, as an entrepreneur and a business owner, like I can't be canceled, I can't be fired. Like I own and run my own business. So the tools of effectiveness that I'm putting in, I can't expect from massive bureaucratic industry big companies. But if you're resisting it within those legacy industries, you also have to fear being replaced for when they bring AI in, because there's just way too many jobs that can also be streamlined. So it's a really interesting dilemma of staying ignorant and then the fear of being replaced because you're not adopting your skill sets to be with AI. Like I'm no longer hiring anyone that isn't proficient. It's actually an interview question that my operational manager has instituted of like, how much are you using ChatGPT and AI? And if the answer is like, not really, I'm not really using it, like you're deselected. You're not in the group anymore.
Yeah, and like this is fascinating because we're going from education in many cases where they're told using AI is cheating, and then boom, they're in the workforce and say, well, if you don't have
You're
any
not
AI
hireable.
experience, we can't hire you. Sorry, like that's crazy.
It is.
Yeah, like I think that education as a an industry need to figure this out and like I'm glad to see that there are studies like the one I referenced earlier being done. I'm talking to a friend of mine who we both volunteer on the board of the rugby club, and she's a teacher, and she's saying she's using AI all the time for creating plans for classes and all sorts of stuff, and that other teachers in the staff room are absolutely this is horrible, we can't use this, and it's just going to make things like those they need to kind of figure it out. It's too big a thing, like it's not going to go away.
No.
It's like saying like we don't like this whole new electricity thing. It's like, well, tough, like it's here to stay. Electricity is here,
No, I know.
computers are here, the internet is here, AI is here. We just gotta get on with it. um okay, so what we're saying is that we're saying that some people are really resistant to AI for various different reasons. And some of that is because, hey, I'm an expert in my field. I already do a really great job. No computer can ever match what I'm doing, right?
Yeah.
So then so part of the issue there, I think, is education, as in they possibly experiment or were shown somebody using AI very badly, and they can't see how good it can be because they haven't, like, we need to spend 7, 8, 9, 10 hours using AI in depth before we even start to scratch the surface of, oh wow, I
Yeah.
can see what it can actually do. Because when it's in the hands of an expert who is an expert in their field, plus they're an expert in using AI, you can get 10, 20x productivity gains. Never mind the 30% that we're kind of seeing across the board.
100%. Like I actually am addicted to ChatGPT. Like I see it as like a drug. Like I get high off of my ability for productivity. And like that's the way that I like to talk about it is it has allowed me to provide way more work, way more value to my clients and customers. And because I can provide them with more, they're getting more because it's not the best use of my time to like type out like key by key a creative brief when I can voice dictate the strategy, the concepts, the range of what I'm pulling together, the angle that I want to hit, and then it produces it for me in 2 minutes. And the best part, Alistair, is I'm not getting any edits. Like for the longest, like for the greater part of my career, I had to explain to people that weren't as sophisticated in my expertise as I, right? Because that's why clients are hiring me. They're not as good at branding or not as good at marketing. And I give them a brief because like time is finite and I didn't have 3 hours to present to them like a shoot brief. But the level of detail and how ChatGPT is able to like eloquently explain it at like a grade 5 level, I'm not getting any edits. So I'm just overall, I can take on more work, I can provide more value. To me, it's something where it's like, I'm just genuinely like, I'm an addict and I love it because it's actually making me better at what I do. I was never the strongest at being at the attention to detail to ensure that whoever was on the other side of receiving my document was getting it at a level that they could process and check the box. Like, I'm in some ways like a savant in that way. I'm like, okay, I get it. Here you go. And they'd be like, okay, well, what is this? But now I'm able to like comprehensively communicate the idea and why I want to do this. And it's transforming my relationship and the amount of relationships that I can have. Like I can take on more and I can do more great things.
Yeah, I found it really useful for articulating concepts like that that sometimes I would have found difficult to articulate to a client. Where you can say, what I really want to get across is the idea that, whatever the concept is, can you help me to articulate that? And it will do a really great job of explaining that. And you could give that to the client because like quite often I find that as an expert that I know instinctively this is the right way to do something, but I'm not sure how to explain that. And I find it brilliant
Yes.
for that in particular. But I think so. One of the things that we talked a little bit about was kind of the quality gap between basic AI usage and expert AI usage is quite
Yeah.
big, and I think that maybe people don't get that, particularly if they've only played around with it a bit. How do you feel about that?
I mean, I think that's kind of it's the biggest first step to overcome. And the way that I like to help people to understand kind of the gravitas of this program is like genuinely every single question you have. So I'll give you like a perfect example. I so it's January when we're recording this. It's the new year. One of the things is I went on like a month vacation, so like my jeans don't fit, and I'm using ChatGPT as a way to like count my macros, and it's like way more effective. So I'm like, okay, hey, today I just drank a coffee, I had a cup of milk, I had 2 eggs, I had spinach. Like, okay, great, here you go. Would you like meal plans for the rest of the day? This is how much protein you can have. It's like, and but I think about it in every area. Like I'll even ask it questions like, hey, I'd like to scale, 10% revenue growth. Like, here are the core areas that I'm making the most money. Based on this, what do you think? And you need to go through the learning pattern because it's a learning model not too far off to how the human brain thinks that you need to learn and realize like what kinds of questions get the results you're looking for, what kinds of areas that you're asking like aren't quite there yet. Like you need to think, you need to the best thing that I learned from the chat from my ChatGPT journey is speak to it as if it's an employee that's working for you. Like speak to it as if it's a human. And even when you give like positive or negative reinforcement, it teaches the learning model that like say this was great, this was awesome, this is exactly what I was looking for, or this was not quite it, this is what I'm looking for here. Like providing actually constructive feedback helps it grow. And I guess to probably more pointedly answer your question, you get a better feel and you get better at it the more you just genuinely think to go and ask it. So, like, the step is just anywhere in your life that you have a question, turning to ChatGPT as the way to get the solution and the answer builds your capability of having AI in your life. Not just seeing it as like a dogmatic of I'm only going to use it to write emails. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and like I see that because I see people using writing emails a lot as an example. Like you see that's even the case on advertisements from the big AI companies is have them writing messages. And I think like yeah, it is good for that, but that is by far
Limiting.
for me the least use that I that I use it for. I use it like for example, about 30% of my chat GPT usage right now is in helping me with recipes. So I like cooking a lot, and so I use it in
Cool.
the kitchen a lot. So I need to cook this, and I want it to be done like this. What time and what temperature? Would it be better to do you use the air fryer, or do I need to do that in a regular oven? That kind of stuff. What would be a good side dish to go with this? I use it for that kind of stuff all the time. And again, that doesn't necessarily help me to use it better for work, but it just gets me in the mode of how to talk to it, and
Using it.
yeah.
Yes.
And but some of the stuff, like for example, I gave a 40-minute presentation yesterday. Was a business breakfast event, and so I asked the IT guy who set up the microphone. Shane was his name. I said, Shane, look, sorry for the last second request, but would you be able to like record the audio of this? And he said, oh, well, I don't have, I haven't got that set up. I said, no, just on your phone, just put it beside the speaker. That's all. It doesn't need to be high quality, high fidelity or anything. And so he recorded the whole thing for me, gave it to me. He sent me an email of the audio about an hour after the event. And so I put that into Otter. It was really bad quality, but it was good enough for it to transcribe it. And so I was able to pull out a transcription of my whole talk, including the introduction of me by the MC and the questions that we got afterwards. I was able to then take the transcription of that, and then I was able to make that into an executive briefing for the event and send that. I included the promotional text, so it got all the names right, so it fixed all the names, because I took that promotional text from the ticketing system that they used. And I just sent that off to the event organizer, and they sent it out to everybody who had been there.
And like,
And
what another level?
that was all done in 30 minutes, and the 30 minutes was actually not me working on it. It was the processing time. I didn't actually, I actually spent probably about 6 minutes total on that. And I think that people don't get that's a kind of a briefing document that included all the highlights of the things that I was speaking about, all the kind of takeaways, recommendations, even a list of some of the questions that I was asked. And that was all in this document, and it was boom done. It was like a three-page A4 document that's gone out to them, and nicely branded PDF. Looks really good. Makes the organizers look really good, because they now have something that's based on literally
Yes.
said, and that was done so quickly. And so for me, like, I know that a lot of people say, AI does create good enough, and yeah, it's really good at creating good enough, like kind of B minus B levels work, and then you can improve it. Sometimes if you use it correctly, it can create A plus content, and really superb content without, and I think that's again going back to capabilities and expert AI usage. Would you agree with that?
Like I would say, like 100%. I would say, in fact, 80% of my AI use is A plus. Like it's actually better than what I could have done, not because I'm not capable of doing it at that level, but truly just from a time cost perspective and how I like to prioritize my time. Like I'm very much a 50,000 foot view, like visionary. Like I'll give you the idea, give you the strategy. To like sit down and to bang out the 11-page brief is just, it's not where I excel. So it actually is giving me the 90. But to your point, like, and to add on to what you're saying, it's the same thing that we do. So my partner and I, whenever we go out for dinner, we put on Otter on the table because we're usually talking about business, talking about content. So we will record our entire dinner conversation or our entire car ride because we'll talk about content. We'll talk about fleeting things. I'll take that recording, I'll distill it into show notes when I'm going into the podcast or to concept ideas to give to the client. And it's like it's not because like I don't take it and say, okay, now write me the script, to record the video. There's the uncanniness of like the creative not being better on how I can communicate, like just from having just so many data points on like how people respond, what words work, my own like cadence, tone, and tenor. That's where it's B minus B. But for me to have that productivity, to take that idea that was in the car, to not have to write it down when I'm in a business meeting with a client, to be able to have all of that synthesized and captured, that makes me a world leading expert. Because if you're resisting that and if you're not growing with that, there's going to be a larger divide in which like I can perform versus somebody else.
Yeah, yeah. And that's another, that's another area. It's not just about creating really great work, but it can also allow you to create really great work uh, a lot more often. Like, for example, I have written more blog posts in the last year than I did in the previous 10 years combined. And Now, this is where we get into an interesting debate, which I had with another guest on this show, Jonathan Stark. We were both talking about the value of using AI when you're writing, and the question is, how do we define whether you've actually written something? Now, a friend of mine, Joe Casabona, who's also on the podcast, said that using AI to write a book is saying that is like saying you used a car to run a marathon. So, and you know, I understand that perspective, but it's not quite the same thing. And so the argument is, if it, like, let's say I drive cross country here, which is like a 3 hour, 4 hour drive, and quite often I will put on dictation and I'll just record myself speaking about a topic. I'll take that, I'll transcribe it, and then I'll say, okay, can you summarize that and then turn that into an outline for a blog post or a podcast or a video or a book. And then I get AI to start outlining the book, giving me feedback on that, and then writing sections of the book. Like, can you say that I truly didn't, that AI wrote that? AI would never have written that without my input. So it's like we're just in a situation where that line is very blurred now, but at the same time, the quality of output and the quality and the quantity of output, of good output, and I know there's an increasing quantity of extremely poor output as well. I understand that, and that there's a lot of crap out there that's AI generated that people are just kind of mass market shoving out. But that productivity gain and that ability to create great content is like I know kind of fanboying a bit. Maybe that's what we're doing here, but like it's very significant. It's a big deal.
Huge.
And so like I guess the issue then is, you know, like, is it just like, do we need to do more to teach people about this, to show them, like what's the next step there?
Well, I think even to what you were just saying, right, about like the whole book concept, it's like it's it's a really interesting analogy of like, you took a car to a race, which, is objectively correct. But then when I think about the reality of the book market now, like I don't know what the stat would be, but it'd be a pretty high percentage of, a lot of the best books, especially like the biographies, autobiographies, are not written by, like, they're ghostwritten. So then the question
Yeah,
kind of becomes,
and have been for
if
years, for decades, for hundreds of years,
years
probably. Yeah.
and if the difference is like, if if the difference is the average person wouldn't get access to your brain if the bottleneck would be you sitting down to hand type out the book, but they're able to get your thinking through an enhanced model. What do you care more about? And like, from my perspective, is I'd rather have more content to consume from smart people if they're able to get it out faster, especially at the speed in which we're going at, right? Like, for my main medium is content. Like, I create a lot of videos. I post a video every day on the internet, and a lot of it is um, evergreen. It's more like core principles, core things. But then a lot of it too is like, this is what's going on with the algorithm right now. And the if I want to get a book out on, how to create a personal brand in the age of TikTok, and there's this like limit, and my medium for being able to get out a 200-page book is AI. Do you now care that I used that tool to help you maximize your business? Like, I think they're just different parameters that we need to. It's like saying, does it matter that I lived another 20 years longer because I had, a fake, I've had a hip replaced? Like, it's kind of that, like, that, even that boat concept, right? Like, how many boards goes on a boat before the boat is a different boat? But like, does it
Yeah.
matter if the boat is like, but on another side, I'm also writing a book right now, and I have found, on a personal note, that utilizing AI as, as a companion to get there with all of my thoughts and using like voice note dictation, it's actually holding me back because
Mhm.
it looks good at first skim as like a busy person, like it looks good enough. But then when I sit it and I read it, I know it's not me, and because I want this to be like a legacy of my thought leadership. It's actually holding me back, that I know that there's something there that is so easy to use, but I also don't feel that it's good enough. And then that's the kind of the question of, you know, do I go back to the art form because I studied writing, or do I leverage AI to get something out fast enough? And it's also a dilemma I'm dealing with too. But a lot of the blogs I put out that are more like, like kind of transient, more disposable of like, I need you to read this week. It may not be relevant in 3 weeks.
Mhm.
AI is a perfect tool.
Yeah, so like what we're talking about here is there's different uses. And so I've spoken to a lot of people about writing. I'm big into writing myself, always have been. And what I find is that writing is really useful and has its place. Like writing stuff out manually, like, okay, not with a pen. I can't write with a pen. My handwriting is worse than a doctor's. Yeah, so I type a lot with writing, like type stuff out.
Good, yeah,
And
yeah,
what I find with that is the process of actually writing develops your thinking. And so it's
yes,
really useful to do that. Now, the issue for me is if you've done that thinking already and you figure that out, but you just need to like turn into a different format. Like you've written 60 blog posts on a topic, let's turn that into a book. AI can really help with that. You've done the work.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
where it's super useful. Or I was interviewed on this topic, or I did a presentation about this. Like I did that presentation yesterday. Okay, I've got the transcript of that. I can turn that into a book, or I can turn it into a blog post, or I can turn it into whatever, without actually having to write the whole thing from scratch. I can do it in four
yeah,
4 minutes. That's the issue, I think. And I think part of it is it's part of it is the level of expertise that you have in your own topic and the level of expertise that you have in using AI, because both of those things matter. If you don't have as much expertise in your topic, you won't realize when AI is making a mistake.
yeah,
Because it'll look right to you, because it's I saw it described earlier today on Blue Sky as the confidently wrong machine. So the confidently wrong machine says something that's wrong very confidently, and somebody who's not an expert doesn't realize it's wrong, and they publish that, or they use that in a client's document or something. And that's where, like, the lawyer who got fired because he used chat gpt in a and it made up all these references to cases that didn't exist. All like that stuff has happened. So
yes.
there's knowledge of your own topic, and then there's knowledge of AI and understanding how it works and that it can make mistakes and all that kind of stuff. And actually having a review process. So I don't publish stuff
Totally.
that I haven't reviewed, that I haven't read. you know so
Well, I would say, but even to add to that, it's like where this is kind of, I think it's going to be the great divide, and on its face is quite concerning. Is it where ChatGPT excels is that it makes smart people smarter,
Mhm,
and that's like it really is the quality of the question. It really is the quality of the input. Like, and that's where when you're having the kind of the value conversation, it's also there's second and third order of thinking, right? Like I need someone to be able to really be using ChatGPT in their day to day. But then the
mhm,
secondary or the tertiary issue is how astute is your ability to see what it spit out as the right answer. So that's what the
mhm,
majority of my job has become, is if I'm getting them to write a brand core, like a brand document for the dark side of AI, and the first four shared values that came out are just not quite right. I have to go back and say, no, no, the four shared values of the persona listening to this podcast is someone who is educated, who understands productivity, who's wanting to streamline effectiveness, cares about time, and and then based on my second order of thinking or my secondary input, that's where it provides me the answers to save me the 45 minutes of just like drafting out the body copy for those headlines. But it doesn't allow you, it doesn't, if you're just leaving it at the first pass, it's not intelligence, it's laziness. So like that's kind of this paradox of what we're talking about, is it makes smart people smarter, but you have to still have those guardrails in place of what you used as a smart professional.
yeah. I think and we're going to have to wrap up in a few minutes. I think that like the way that I think about this, and I think about, we're increasing productivity, we're increasing capability, we're increasing capacity, I guess. I don't know if that's the same, if that's a euphemism for productivity. um these are all interconnected. There's your level of expertise in the topic, there's having processes and systems and guardrails like you talked about. It comes back, and this is going to sound very self-serving, I apologize, but the truth is, I think it comes back to education and training,
It does.
and
It does.
and having an open mind and spending time using it. And like it horrifies me that AI uses as much electricity as it does. but I'm not
Yeah.
going to like I can't personally change that, and I also can't stop people using AI. And I also think that it could potentially help us to address that problem as well in the future as it develops more. Um, and so I think that we just need to start using it more and more. Like uh, one of the biggest problems in the late the late 19th century, so about the year 1899 to 1900, one of the biggest problems in New York City was they were creating too much horse dung every day. They were creating tons and tons of horse dung. That problem went away. They thought that that was a major problem, and that problem was gone in 10 years because of the development of motor cars. So things we can solve these things. I'm not saying that that we're going to find it, in next year or the year after, but I think that these things will be solved. I think that we need to use AI more and more to learn how to use it more. It's also going to develop in capabilities, and it's doing so very quickly. And like in the case of your former employee, like you can get left behind if you refuse to use it. If you're um, if it's just it feels wrong to you. Like I don't want to hire an accountant who uses an abacus. I want to hire an accountant who uses calculators and spreadsheets and AI if it's available. That's the accountant that I want to work with. I want to work with somebody who is using the best tools for the job, not somebody who like feels like I'm a craftsman and I can only use abacus because that's the way 14 generations of my family did it or whatever. I'm sure there are certain crafts where we will still need to do things, and particularly in art. Like I do really feel for designers and artists who do these amazing creations, and they see AI doing something that's 80% or 90% of what they've done, in 1% of the time. And I understand that too, but there is a place for the craft aspect. But I think that for many of us, AI is coming for us and coming for our jobs. And so we either need to get on board with using it and figuring out how to use it properly, or we're going to be left behind.
100%. Like at the end of the day, like if this was a shocking thing to hear, it needs to actually move you to act. Like we now live in a world where it it if you are within any kind of desk job, AI has to be a part of your productivity. And if your job doesn't allow that, then you need to be using it like how Alistair is doing it outside of the job space so that you at least are developing and building those skills, because it is a skill to develop. Like it does take hours and hours and hours to really understand what questions to ask, how to ask the right amount of questions, how to ask a question that is just so detailed and descriptive that it gives you what you want, but you need to be using it every single day. It is I listened to the All In podcast, which is a fantastic podcast, and they said such an astute point that AI is bigger than the printing press. Like this is like we are living in real time a seismic milestone and event for human history. So you if you're not using it, what does that mean for your family?
Mm. That's deep. Um, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you wanted to talk about today?
No, I think that if like you sharing resources to help people have AI as part of their toolkit is so necessary. And as an employer, and someone that really advocates, like my whole job is really storytelling, which is like an age old concept. And it pulls on things like human emotion, which is where I think AI won't be able to replace for a long time. It's like the human emotion, human connectedness. But even I, someone who like uses like core human fundamentals, I can't go a day. So funny, we were logging on to our company morning meeting yesterday, and one of my partners was like, "Hey, has anyone like loaded ChatGPT? It's like not working for me." And I'm like, "Nope, haven't gotten my hit yet. Like we're about to start." And it was half the team was like, "Yeah, it's not really working for me either right now." And it's so interesting how it's like it's one of our team members. Like it is a part of our daily productivity. So you have to start
Mm,
using it.
yeah. And like one thing that I want to get across to people is if you're a highly skilled professional, using AI does not diminish your personal expertise. It
No,
doesn't mean that your work isn't as good. And it doesn't mean that what AI is producing is necessarily going to be better than what you would create manually. But you with AI together can create more, better, and faster. That's
Yes.
what I've found, and that's what lots of people are finding.
And my last thing to add to that is actually you have to flip the script. Like what you actually need to ask yourself is, what is it that your client wants from you? And it's often that answer of like, they don't want you to take 6 days to write a brief. They just want that direction from you that allows them to strike, to move to act. So you need to reframe what you think they're paying for, because the customer isn't paying for me to spend 14 hours on something that's just for like an email campaign. They just want the directive for the email campaign so that their team can start moving, or whatever that is within your business framework. But you need to just restructure the question of, what is it that your client wants and where do they see value? And it's often not in the labor it takes for you to translate your thoughts into a format that they can process and digest. And that's where AI comes in.
Camille, you are a wonderful brand expert, brand strategist. Where can people find you if they want to learn more?
You can find me on every platform under my name, Camille Moore. Watch out on TikTok. I've got a lot of fake memes, but the real me is Camille.Moore_. So I hope to see you on any of my socials, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, or LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, look, thank you so much for coming on. Sorry we went a bit over time, but I really do appreciate you coming on today. I hope everybody, particularly in Ireland and Europe, are okay and surviving the storms that we have over here. It's been a bit crazy here, storm of the century type stuff, but I hope everybody is good out there. I did want to mention, and again, it's slightly self-serving, I understand that, but I really do believe in the power of education. I have a guide called An Absolute Beginner's Guide to Using AI, which you can find at aipowered.biz/guide. And that will be a great way to get started if you are in the position where you want to pick up something and just get started using it today. So Camille Moore, thank you so much again for all of your time and for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. Speak soon.
Cheers.